How do wings work? 400 million years ago, evolution made a groundbreaking leap. A decision that would affect everything from the way we go on holiday to how we produce green energy. That decision? Defy gravity. Join me as we take a deep dive into the story of how wings work. But how did we go from prehistoric insects to the birds we see flying today? To uncover the secrets of flight, I fell down a rabbit hole of physics and biology and ended up learning a lesson I never thought I would. And by the end of this video, you will understand not only how wings work, but also how the same mechanisms turn wind turbines and send satellites deep into space. To understand the whole picture of how the wings work, we're going to take a journey through 5 chapters, starting with the feathers. The first animals to evolve wings were insects 400 million years ago, followed by pterosaurs 210 million years ago. Birds appeared 150 million years ago, and mammals joined the skies 50 million years ago. But among all flying creatures, bird wings stand out for one reason: feathers. But why are feathers so important for birds' flight? Unlike the skin membrane wings of pterosaurs and bats, feathers are lightweight, flexible, and strong. Membrane wings need heavy bone and muscles, adding weight and limiting mobility. They also attach across the body, making walking or climbing awkward. Feathers solve these problems with intricate adaptations. Some are symmetrical, while others are asymmetrical, interlocking to form smooth, aerodynamic surfaces. Variations in shape are rounded, they're sharp, they're notched. Let the feathers fine-tune the aerodynamics. And the most important adaptation of feathers, their weight. But why is it so important to reduce weight when evolving to fly? Even as far back as 384 BC, Aristotle puzzled over the relationship between air and motion. Fast forward to 1799, where Sir George Cayley laid the foundations of modern flight by identifying the 4 fundamental forces at play: lift, thrust, drag, and weight. But to understand these 4 fundamentals, we need to move on to Chapter 2, Forces. Before a bird can produce lift, it must first generate thrust by flapping its wings, propelling them forwards. Each flap consists of a downstroke and an upstroke. During the downstroke, the bird fully extends its wings, moving them downward and inward with interlocking feathers forming a solid sheet. And this pushes the air backwards and beneath the bird. On the upstroke, the wings fold back towards the body and move forwards at an angle, allowing the feathers to separate and pass easily through the air. Drag resists this motion, while their wings produce lift to overcome gravity and their weight. The less weight they carry, the less lift they need. And this is why feathers have been crucial to the bird's success. To understand how this motion generates thrust, we turn to Sir Isaac Newton's 3rd law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. As the bird pushes the air backwards, the equal and opposite reaction propels the bird forwards. But this is where we hit another big issue the birds have to overcome, and a topic that's so complicated, its name matches how time feels discussing it: drag. In 1871, Francis Herbert Wenham designed and created the first wind tunnel. And this is just a long tunnel with a large fan that blows air in order to study the effects air has on physical objects. These are now used to calculate the drag force. But what actually is the drag force? In fluid dynamics, drag, also known as fluid resistance,
acting opposite to relative motion, can exist between 2 fluid layers: fluid velocity relative to form drag, pressure drag, friction drag, viscous drag.
It's just this. It's this. Look at this equation. And it's basically friction with the air. As the air passes around the wings, the air molecules rub against the molecules of the bird, and some of the air's momentum passes onto the bird, and some of the bird's momentum passes onto the air. And this thin layer of air experiencing friction with the wing is called the boundary layer. So to try and demonstrate this, we've attached GPS to the birds, which links to my phone here. We're going to fly them all to demonstrate how drag slows their flight or allows them to speed up depending on the size of their wing. First up is Sway, and with the widest wing surface area, he hit a max speed of just 20 miles per hour. Next we have Peggy, and while she does have a broad pair of wings, they're slightly smaller than Sway's, allowing her to hit 22 miles per hour. But with Sky, her very thin wings allow her to hit a max speed of 75 miles per hour, proving larger surface areas create a higher drag force. The two other forces, lift and weight, act the same as thrust and drag, but on a vertical plane. Wings generate the lift, and the bird's own weight under gravity works against this. This balance of forces is also why birds can't grow indefinitely, but more of that in Chapter 5. Let's move on to Chapter 3, the shape. To fly, being lightweight and generating thrust isn't enough. You also need to generate lift. This is achieved through the cross-sectional shape of the wing called an aerofoil. An aerofoil generates lift as air flows around it. Its shape is rounded at the front, tapering towards the back with a slight downward curve. In birds, this is formed by the limb creating the rounded, or what we call the leading edge, with the feathers extending to form the trailing edge. But how does this shape create lift? Well, there are two key theories. The first takes us back to Newton's third law of motion again. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. As the wing stretches open and moves forwards, the concave underside angles the feathers downwards, directing airflow towards the ground. This downward force on the air pushes the bird upwards. However, Newton's third law alone can't explain everything. Symmetrical aerofoils like those on some aeroplanes lack a concave shape, yet still generate lift. And how can stunt planes fly upside down? For that, we turn to Bernoulli's principle. Does faster moving air have more or less pressure than slower moving air?
I think that it's got more pressure. We'll go for less.
Less, okay.
Faster moving air has more pressure.
Faster moving air has more pressure, okay.
Less.
Less, okay. Developed in 1738 by Daniel Bernoulli, who found that faster moving fluids exert lower pressure. Would you care to explain?
I'm now thinking that the molecules will be further apart and that it would now have less pressure than slower.
Okay.
Revise my opinion.
Okay. I'm interested to know what people think, so leave what your answer would have been before watching this video as a comment below. The best way for me to describe this is at the start of a large running race, like a marathon. All the fast-running people pull ahead and have lots of space between each other, whereas all the slower-moving people stay bunched up, bumping into one another. And here's how it works with an aerofoil. As the air hits the rounded front edge, it splits. Some flows over the top and some underneath. The air above curves around the wing's surface, experiencing centripetal acceleration. And this is because velocity is a quantity that measures the speed and direction of an object. Objects travelling around a curved surface have a change in direction, and therefore must have a change in acceleration. And that's what's crazy to me, is that this same mechanism is also what allows satellites to be catapulted deep into space. This acceleration causes the air on top to speed up, reducing its pressure. Meanwhile, slower moving air beneath maintains the higher pressure, creating a pressure differential, and this difference generates an upwards force, lift. But how do birds ensure that the longer curved surface causing the accelerated air is always the top of the wing and never the bottom of the wing? To understand that, we need to move on to Chapter 4. Incidence, attack, dihedral, and the ability to fly upside down. What do they all have in common? Angles. Let's break them down. First, we need some reference lines. Draw a line from the wing's leading edge to its trailing edge. This is the chord line. Now, add a line parallel to the bird's body. The angle between these lines is the angle of incidence, which birds can adjust by rotating their wings, a crucial ability during takeoff in varying wind conditions. The angle of incidence also influences the angle of attack, the angle between the chord line and the incoming airflow. By increasing the angle of attack, a bird pitches its wings upwards, ensuring airflow accelerates over the top surface to create that lift. This same principle allows planes with symmetrical aerofoils to fly upside down. The air follows the wing's shape due to the Coanda effect, where fluids stick to curved surfaces. Too high an angle of attack and you will cross the critical angle. causing the coandrite effect to fail. Airflow will separate from the wing, becoming turbulent, and lift is lost. Phenomenon known as stalling. This contributed to the tragic 1896 death of Otto Lilienthal, when his glider, lacking sufficient thrust, stalled in strong headwinds. He fell 15 meters and broke his neck, and he died the next day. The third angle, the dihedral angle, relates to the wing's positioning rather than a cross-section. A wing angled upwards, dihedrali, enhances stability. If a bird rolls mid-flight, the lower wing's increased angle of attack naturally corrects its position. Conversely, birds like falcons and some true hawks have an anhedral wing angle, where the wings angle downwards. This reduces stability, but significantly increases maneuverability, ideal for high-speed aerial agility. But anyways, it's nice having all this information. Could I use it to make myself a set of wings and fly? For that, we need to move on to Chapter 5. Well, actually, yes. For the average person to fly, they'd only need a wingspan of just over 6 meters. But why is the largest flying bird today limited to a wingspan of just 3 meters? Why don't we have birds big enough to fly us to the shop like dragons in Game of Thrones? It all comes down to wing loading. Wing loading is the weight of a bird relative to the surface area of its wings. A bird with large wings and a light body, like sway, has a low wing loading, making it easy to generate lift. On the other hand, a bird with smaller wings and a heavier body like sky has a high wing loading, where the lift force struggles to overcome the bird's weight. To demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a few seconds from 3 different birds. Sway, who has a very light wing loading, Sky, who has a very heavy wing loading, and Peggy, who's somewhere in the middle. And I want you just to see if you notice the difference between the 3 of their flights. Did you see it? Sway, who has really light wing loading, doesn't have to put as much work into his flight, and so he doesn't flap very often, where Sky, who has very heavy wing loading, has to flap far more frequently. Most birds have a wing loading of between 1 and 20 kilograms per square meter, the maximum limit for flight being about 25 kilograms per square meter. But why can't birds just keep getting bigger and growing proportionally larger wings? Well, this is due to the square cube law, which shows how size scales differently for surface area and volume. Take Sway, for example. At 1.5 kilograms and a 2 meter wingspan, his wing loading is roughly 0.75 kilograms per square meter. It's not exact. If Sway doubled in size, his wing area would square, growing to about 4 meters from tip to tip. But his volume and his weight would be cubed, increasing to around 3.4 kilograms. His new wing loading would be 0.85 kilograms per square meter. A small, significant increase. And this pattern continues with larger sizes. Heavier wing loading makes flight increasingly difficult. And this is why birds can't just keep growing indefinitely. The physics of flight imposes limits. At the start of this video, I said that all of this would explain how we make green energy, and was in fact referring to wind turbines. The blade on a wind turbine is basically just a really long wing, and as the wind blows, the lower pressure on the top side of the blade drags it round, causing them to spin. So birds developing wings hundreds of millions of years ago has come all the way to now producing electricity, allowing you to watch this very video. So the feathers make them light, the flapping gives them thrust, the shape of the wing gives them lift and pushes them up, the angles make sure lift is maintained, and the wing loading determines the size of the bird. And all of this put together is how wings work. So from feathers to forces to aerofoil to angles, next time you see a bird soaring through the sky, receive a package from across the globe, or even watch a wind turbine spinning, you'll know it's all part of a story that began 400 million years ago. And the strange lesson I learnt while researching everything for this video: one change in life, no matter how small or big, could one day ripple out in surprising ways to present you with something you never would have expected.